you to the UJ Library for being able to put together this event so that we can be able to host Mpho Dagada this afternoon. My name is Sandy. I'm a UJFM presenter, and so this afternoon, quite excited to be talking about something very interesting. We're talking about entrepreneurship and cryptocurrencies post-COVID-19 and implications for new business. Now, it's so exciting, specifically because the person who's going to be with us this afternoon for the next hour or so is Mr. Mpho Dagada, and he is quite a notable person, right? Let me just give you just a short bio, ladies and gentlemen, about this gentleman. He's a member of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, that's 4IR. He's also an author, he's a keynote speaker, he's a talk show host, he's a digital futurist, and investor as well. He's built many successful businesses in logistics, hospitality, education, as well as e-commerce, founding the likes of invest in future currency, NDA Media, Foodz Holdings, just to mention a few. And also he's, I did mention he's an author, so he penned the book, Mr. Bitcoin, How I Became a Millionaire at Age 21. And basically that book looks at his journey basically in this particular field. Mpho, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's really a wonderful experience, I think, to have a millionaire with us this afternoon. I mean, what's the chance that you can speak to someone who became a millionaire at the age of 21?
No, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in.
No, definitely. And of course, as we just jump into the conversation, let's start off on just some background into who Mpho Dagada is.
Cool. Mpho Dagada is an author, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and also a member of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I wear quite a few hats, but I think at the core of it, Mpho Dagada is an entrepreneur at heart, and will always be an entrepreneur.
And then in terms of the field that you're very involved in. So you're very involved in the field of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Now, for someone out there, that could all be Latin, those phrases and those terms, but could you just please break it down for us in terms of what is cryptocurrency and what is Bitcoin?
Right, interesting. So cryptocurrencies are a digital coin, or rather a digital asset, as many would call it, depending on your country definition, but basically a digital asset which encryption techniques are used to actually create it. What we mean by encryption techniques, we're talking about the actual coding of it. These encryption techniques work within a blockchain system. So it's a digital asset in which encryption techniques are used to create it, and it functions within a blockchain system.
Yeah, wow. And then in terms of Bitcoin, Bitcoin a lot on the streets, like everybody knows Bitcoin is, everybody has been, ending the word Bitcoin around. Now, it's how you made your fortune. My understanding was your book is called Mr. Bitcoin, right? So give us some background to that.
So you were cutting there a bit, but I believe you're asking about the background of my book. So my book journey is a story
Yes.
of how I actually began my entrepreneurial journey from university till date, which is some of the stuff we'll discuss today. And some of the pitfalls, some of the mistakes, some of the opportunities, as well as many of the different learnings that I actually learned along my journey. So it journeys the whole story, but it also highlights some points about me actually finding out about Bitcoin, how I actually got involved with Bitcoin, with blockchain technology, and how I actually made money from it. So it's quite an interesting book that journeys out my entrepreneurship journey.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So listen, to everybody that's just joined us, I see there's hands up already, and there's people that joined us. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on the social platform that you're joining us on. Now, please do know that you can be able to ask questions or reach out to us using the platform. You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and then we can go to you. Or preferably though, you can type your question and then we'll be able to read your question out, and then we'll be able to get Mpho to respond to your questions. And already we have Alrina asking, what is blockchain?
Very interesting. I think we'll get to the questions at the end. But yeah, I'm gonna begin, and then I think at the end we'll do the Q&A and cover all the different questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for mentioning that. So then that's what we'll do. We'll listen to Mpho right now, and he's got a presentation for us. We'll listen to Mpho, and then please, if you do have a question, just jot it down somewhere, and then you can ask it at the end when we have a Q&A session, or maybe just to make a mental note of the question, and we'll make sure to pose as many questions as to Mpho as possible. So keep them coming later on, though. So take it away, Mpho.
All right, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you to Theo who coordinated the session. Thank you to everybody who's actually logged on. I'm seeing quite a few people. I've got my Facebook screen here, so I'm seeing quite a few people on Facebook and as well on Zoom. So it's quite an exciting time to be able to do these sort of sessions on all these different platforms. So thank you to everybody who's tuning in, everybody who's found time, and to our host, thank you so much for hosting us. I think a very good point to start with is a journey that I took quite a few years ago when I went to Silicon Valley in the United States of America. And I think our topic is very relevant today because we in a time where a lot of people are stressed or rather frustrated as to what the future looks like after COVID-19. What will the job market look like? Whether jobs will be available, what will not be available, what will be available. So I think it's a very good point for us to stretch it forth and discuss it to say, how do we navigate this post-COVID-19 entrepreneurship space? And what do cryptocurrencies or the digital revolution look like post-COVID-19? I think a very good place to start is the different experience that we get from the different places that we go to. And going back to my experience of going to Silicon Valley, and I had the opportunity to go to Stanford University, which is a great institution, and to learn from some of the greats there. And one thing that I quickly noticed about that experience is that when one goes to university, and I think it's a very good point to start since we've got lots of students that are tuned in, it's very important for one to have a goal as to why they're actually going to university. And I think a lot of the times when we think about that, one would actually think that the goal is to study the degree and get the degree, right? But I think the goal beyond the degree should always be, what path am I paving for myself? You know, when you go to an institution like Silicon Valley, in that university, you find that many of the people that are in that university are there to actually try and create something. You know, when you're on campus, you're hearing words like IPO, you know, you're hearing people say lean startup method. You're hearing people say, well, this is the innovative product that I'm working on. That when you're actually studying, you're putting what you're actually studying into good use, and you're paving an industry for yourself. In South Africa, we're all aware that we've got very high unemployment rates, and the biggest problem with unemployment is that it directly means that there aren't enough people creating employment. A lot of the time people look at it from the standpoint of government, you know, that government is not creating enough jobs, etc. But what it does show us is that there aren't enough people becoming entrepreneurs. And if the educated people in South Africa, the people that are going to universities, are not the ones starting jobs and companies, then who are we depending on to start jobs and companies? I always tell the story that today, Facebook employs a host of people internationally. And even here in South Africa, Facebook has got a lot of different employees. But what we see from that is that a student who was in Stanford actually started a company or a business in university, and that business actually grew forth to then create so many jobs that are available. And if we fast or backtrack and ask ourselves, what if Mark Zuckerberg did not start that while he's in university? We wouldn't have all these jobs that are available today. So I'd like to challenge everybody and implore everybody who's viewing today to say, as you go through the session, as we discuss more, I want you to think about the one thing that you want to create that's actually going to help the country employ jobs, the one thing that you actually want to start, the one business that you want to start. And I want to just share some thoughts on a few things that I've come to study and learn about the country and the opportunities, so that at the end of this session, everybody's got a clear idea of what entrepreneurial journey, entrepreneurial product, entrepreneurial experience that they want to build, because it's so important that we build entrepreneurs in Africa. And I think a good place for us to start is to look at what we have. Many a times when people want to start a business, they tend to look outside of what they have, which is a very bad experience, because you want to look at what you have, and from what you have, you want to build something from that. And what we have in South Africa or in Africa is mineral resources. That's what we've got in its vast capacity. That's what we have as an African continent. I was talking to a member of parliament in Nigeria, and he was saying to me, he said something so shocking to me. And when I heard it, at first I thought he's being dramatic, but when I kept thinking about it, I thought we truly have a problem. And he was saying that in Nigeria, they import matchsticks, that all matchsticks in Nigeria are all imported, you know? So every single matchstick that they use in Nigeria is imported. And you ask yourself, why would an African country be importing a matchstick from China? I mean, the logic of it all is saying that we've got a matchstick moving from China into Africa. And when we look at where the where the natural resources for that matchstick come from, they actually come from Africa. The wood in the matchstick comes from Africa, as well as the actual part that actually burns the matchstick. That too comes from Africa. But all that mineral resources is transported out of Africa into China. China creates matchsticks and sells it back to Africa. And I'm using a trivial example, which is a true example, so that we can see the magnitude of the problem that we actually have as Africans. And one thing that awoken this even more is that when coronavirus first hit us, hospitals, clinics, and different government departments were looking for products that were available on the market that they can get supplied to them to actually battle this coronavirus. And the one thing that happened is straight after the government has released all these purchase orders and telling everybody that they need all sorts of products, what happened was we saw a lot of different unions, a lot of different parties and groupings like the Black Business Council, the Black Management Forum, coming forth and saying, we want to see the procurement of all the things that will be used during coronavirus. We want to see this procurement happening in Africa to create jobs for South Africans, you know. And the one thing that was very odd is that most of the products that came in, most of the donations that happened, majority of them came from China. Now you ask yourself, we're here in coronavirus, we've lost all the jobs that, you know, all the companies have shed off and all the companies that they're saying that they're going to shed off. And yet we're looking for products. And when we look for products, we still go out to China to look for these products. And when I talk about products, I'm talking about masks, for example. A simple thing like the mask that people are looking for, people had to look to China just for a basic thing like masks, you know. And when we look at the American way of doing things, we see that a lot of the different stuff that was needed during coronavirus, for example, ventilators, we see that Elon Musk, through his companies, he decided that he's going to stop manufacturing cars for a moment and create ventilators for New York, you know. And this is the entrepreneurial flair and journey that we need within South Africans, and most specifically young South Africans. Because the truth of the matter is that the old South Africans are not going to do it for us. The old South Africans that are there, you know, the 50, 60, 70-year-olds are not going to do it for us. It's up to me and you, the 20-year-olds, you know, the people who are actually in university, the young minds to do it. Because when we look all around the world and we realize where the entrepreneurial flair, the entrepreneurial journey is coming from, we see that it's coming from the young people. We see that it's young people that are actually behind this thing. And it's so important for us to be aware, but not only aware, to actively engage it. A lot of the times when I speak to young people, the big question that remains is how then do we do it, you know? And I always say to people that when I look at case studies of how the biggest and best people have done it, and you ask yourself this question, how did they do it? You realize something very fundamental in the beginning, that they too actually did not know what they were doing. You know, when they asked Mark Zuckerberg whether he was aware that Facebook would become this huge platform that we're all using today, I mean, we're all streaming onto Facebook today, right? By the way, the Facebook broadcast has been interrupted. So whoever's helping us with the technical part, if you can just make sure that the Facebook side is also running as well. But basically, we see that all these people throughout their journeys, all of them started from somewhere. And that was the important thing that they did. I remember explaining to a graduate who was looking for a job, I said to them that as you do look for a job as a graduate, because I mean, everybody's got their own ideas or plans of how they want their life to be. In the process of looking for a job, it's so important that you're not sitting at home looking for a job. It's so important that you're looking for a job as you are actively doing something entrepreneurial to advance yourself. One thing that Africans need to really look at, and this is post-coronavirus, and I think coronavirus has made us even much more aware of this, is that we need to be a country that utilizes our skills, our natural resources to actually produce things, to actually be a country that's actually creating something that the rest of the world needs. I was looking at the demand of South African exports during the season of coronavirus, and the two different demands that were existent was for the wine market, people saying that they need wines from South Africa, and the agricultural market, people saying they need food from South Africa, you know. And as much as that's a good thing, what we realize about the South African economy is that most of the stuff we let out of the country is raw materials, you know. Most of the stuff we let out of the country is stuff that we haven't added value onto it. You know, we just plant it, grow it, and then we ship it off. We mine it or dig it, and then we ship it off to other countries. And those countries then turn that into a final product and sell it back to us. And when we look at where the value lies within any sort of product, it actually lies within the branding, it actually lies within the final product that they sell back to us. That's where the margins, the profits, and the growth and the scale actually comes from. Because with just natural resources, you can't really do much. But it's very important for you to actually be able to add value onto it. And after adding value onto it, then you can then go forth and you know, add on or grow whatever the value chain or etc. is. I see that the Facebook is back live, which is a great thing. So that's one thing that I want us to look at, and I want us to discuss it together to say, how do we create these economies post-coronavirus? If anything, coronavirus or this season that has happened in South Africa, it's allowed us to learn that there's so many things that are missing. I mean, I spoke to many different people that only woke up to the experience now that where they stay has got a bad data connection. You know, I've heard so many people saying to me, I'm unable to work from home because I actually can't get access to the internet, you know, or I actually don't have access to this or that and this. And it's so important that in this fourth industrial revolution where jobs are now being created online, or as South Africans, we're so aware that we are to engage online, you know, we are to actually do jobs online, we are to actually do everything online. I had a meeting with one of the ambassadors from the Canadian embassy in South Africa, and we had the meeting on Zoom, you know, and when I got to the meeting, I was saying to him that, oh, this is very new, it's a new world that we live in. And he said to me, well, this is not very new because he has meetings all the time with the government of Canada from South Africa through Zoom, you know. So I said, this is a very familiar space for him. And the truth of the matter is that for the rest of the world, this is not as new as we're all making it to see, you know. But in South Africa, it's very new because we haven't actually harnessed the opportunity to get to the stage. I remember saying to somebody that it's quite awkward, or I think I can be as harsh as saying it's quite embarrassing to see that, you know, when South African politicians or when the president or when ministers are having their meetings through Zoom, they're getting hacked, these meetings, people are coming in and doing all sorts of things. And it's as though we've encountered a new technology, but this technology has been there for some time, you know. The rest of the world has already got their own platforms that they use for this sort of thing. So it's so important for us as Africans to be aware that there is a gap that we need to fill. And this gap needs to be a burning or a desire or a going concern for each and every young South African. You know, I've taken the approach to say I only speak about creating products, creating entrepreneurship opportunities to young people. Because to the older generation, they've had the time to do it and they haven't done it. They failed Africans. They haven't actually created any jobs. When we look at some of the companies in South Africa, we look at some of the leadership of these companies that's of, you know, above 40, above 50, and we look at how much of what they do actually comes from out of the country, we realize that they don't actually have a concern for creating jobs in the country. That we as young people need to actually create this concern, have this concern, and start doing it within our specific constituents, within our friendship groups, within our circles, whatever we in. We need to make it a point that we actually creating jobs for young South Africans. Now, when we look at this job market, I want to go back to the natural resources that I spoke to. What we're looking at is we're looking at a country, which is South Africa, which has all it has or all it needs to create final products. yet we haven't created final products. I engaged a few entrepreneurs within the engineering faculties, and I asked them, is there anything that we don't have as South Africans or Africans to create a motor vehicle? And they said to me that all products that are needed to create a car reside within Africa. I then went forth to ask a second question to say, is there anything that we don't have in Africa to create a computer? Is there something we're missing that we don't have as Africans or South Africans to create a computer? They came back to me and said, no, we've got everything we need to create a computer. And it then led me to this question that I want to ask everybody who's on Facebook as well as on the Zoom call. And if we've got everything we need in Africa to create computers, to create cars, if we've got everything, why aren't we creating these computers? Why aren't we creating cars? You know, I'm doing the Zoom call from a MacBook. You're doing the Zoom call from your device, or whatever device you've got. Ask ourselves the question, why is it that we aren't creating this when we've got all the natural resources? Why is it that each and every car that lands on our shore is important, or even the cars that are created here are created by companies that come from outside of South Africa? And these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves and engage with these questions, because it's only when these thoughts enter your mind that you begin to engage with them and actually start to realize what's to happen. Now, I looked at a few case studies of different nations and different countries to say, how are countries built? How do the rest of the world do it? And one very interesting country that I'd like us to just discuss for a few moments is Dubai, or rather, not really a country, more like a province or a city, right? Is Dubai. Dubai has managed to build everything that they've built within a space of 20 years. There's one favorite story that I love about Dubai that I'd love to share with you guys. When they call him the sheikh, but in South Africa would call him the mayor, you know. When the mayor of Dubai wanted to build Disneyland, he said to Disneyland head office in the US that, Disney, we want to build the biggest Disneyland in Dubai. And obviously, as we all know, the biggest Disneyland is in America. So he approached the Americans and he said, we want to build the biggest Disneyland in the world in Dubai. We have the funds for it. We want to build it. What do we have to do? And Disney came back to him and said, well, that's not quite possible. We're not going to allow you guys to actually build this Disneyland in Dubai because we want Disneyland to be in a specific country. We've already planned it to be in a specific way. So we're not going to allow you guys to do it. And you know what the Sheikh of Dubai, or the mayor of Dubai, as we would have it, did? He then built, he called it Dubai Land, not Disneyland, which is 2.5 times bigger than the biggest Disneyland that we've got in the world. And that's the attitude and the aggression that we too should have as South Africans, because we've got the natural resources with us. We have everything for us. I mean, in Dubai, they have everything working against them. The temperature is working against them. The soil that they have is working against them. When they wanted to build the Burj, which is the biggest or tallest building in the world, they were told that it's not quite possible with the sort of sand or the sort of landscape that they have. But they were able to do it because what they had, and this is the most important thing that I believe that each and every South African should have, is they had the right mentality of where they want the country to go. And we all need to have that same mentality in South Africa. We all need to have the producer mentality, the entrepreneurship mentality to say, what am I going to create? You know, I looked up at a research study as to what people aspire to being in many different parts of the world, you know. And when we looked into Africa and African countries, we realized that many people in African countries aspire to be politicians. They aspire to be politicians. They aspire to be mayors. They aspire to be ministers. They aspire to be premiers, MECs, presidents. That's what many South Africans aspire to be. And when we compared it to China, and we looked at what do many people in China aspire to be, we actually found that majority of the Chinese youth do not aspire to be politicians. And their reasoning has always been because politicians have never built anything that's actually created something of value. Many of the Chinese youth actually want to become producers. They want to create things that they can sell to different countries. And when we look at a stat like that, we actually realize that we've got a mentality problem within South Africans and within Africa. But the mentality here is a very short circuit mentality, a very shortcut mentality. Finish my studies and go and get a job and end up in that job for the many different years that I'll be continuing. That not many Africans are actually thinking of entrepreneurship. That not many Africans are actually engaging into how do I create a product of value? How do I create something of value? Something very controversial, or rather interesting, happened this week that I saw on Instagram. Gucci is now creating a blanket, which many African families have always been using for all these different years. So the Basotho people have got this blanket. I know the Venda people have got it. So it's basically just, you know, the blankets that people put on them, right? And this blanket that Gucci is now creating, they're now selling it for 15,000 South African rand, right? So obviously in South Africa, these blankets that you can get, if you know anything about the Basotho culture or the Venda culture, you'll know that these blankets are 200 rand, 300 rand, 400 rand at maximum, right? But Gucci is now selling this blanket for 15,000 rand. And believe it or not, who is Gucci's target market when it comes to selling this blanket? It's Africans. Who are the people that are going to buy this blanket? It's going to be Africans. And we ask ourselves this question to say, something that we've always created or something that we've always had, Gucci is now creating it. And only when Gucci created, that's when the demand, or people are now calling it a luxury blanket. And I'd love for you guys just to go on the Gucci website after the Zoom session, just look at this blanket, you know. It's exactly the same blankets that we see the Basotho people wear, the Venda people wear, or the blankets that we've actually got. But there's a big difference when Gucci is doing it and when the African people are doing it. And that's the big gap that we need to push in. We need to push in the branding gap. We need to push in the gap where entrepreneurs create a product created to be the best in the world, marketed, branded, and sell it from that perspective. Where African people are creating something and putting it out there to be the best in the world. Where the intention is not only to sell to your locality, but the intention is for you to actually sell to the rest of the world. The intention is for you to actually export that product, export whatever good you've actually created and marketed to the world, because this is the only way that we're going to fix our unemployment rate. This is the only way we're going to fix the biggest inequality gap in the world, which is South African inequality. In the whole world, we are the most unequal society. This is the only way that we're going to fix it. And it starts with the young people in Africa engaging with this thing, choosing an industry. You select, what industry am I in? And in that industry, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine, I said, the clothing and textile manufacturing industry is worth 3 trillion in the whole entire world. 3 trillion. Africa takes part in less than 1% of that industry. And we ask ourselves, if the whole clothing, textile, manufacturing industry is worth 3 trillion, how come Africans are only taking part in 1% of that 3 trillion? How are we expecting growth to actually happen when we look at all these industries and we take just a small part? I mean, 1%, we make up so many people. And I mean, Africa has got the largest youth constituents in the world, the largest young people in the world. And we only get 1% of this industry. And it's so important that as young people, when we look at this post-COVID-19, because what's going to happen after COVID-19 is that we're going to have more unemployment, more people seeking jobs, more graduates seeking jobs, and we're going to have this upheaval of people looking for ways or solutions or things out of this system. And the solutions need to come from the entrepreneurs. And this is why our topic today is post-COVID-19 entrepreneurship. How do we make sure that it actually happens? How do we make sure it's actually effective? And what is so important is that when you look at whatever business you want to get involved with, whatever industry you want to get involved with, always look at how much is my industry worth? What's the market cap of my industry? And take the decision to say, I want to take 10% of that market cap. I want to take 1% of that market cap. I want to take 5% of that market cap. And this is how I'm going to do it. Look at the best examples of people that have done it in the world and take those examples practically and implement them into your own business. Engage yourself into that. To say, I want to be part of this industry. These are the best people in the industry. And this is how I'm going to take over this industry. This is how I'm going to make a success of this industry. It's so important. I mean, when I always get this question whenever I speak about entrepreneurship, and the question is always, how then do you start? So when I was in first year in the University of Johannesburg, I wanted to start a business. But at that time, I didn't actually have enough capital to start a business. I wanted to actually start a business that was going to make me enough money so that when I'm done with university, I continue on with business and not looking for a job. I had a few things that encouraged me to start a business. One of them was how much my peers who started working were earning as a salary. You know, that was a huge motivation segment for me to say, if this is what I'm going to be earning when I finish varsity, then I better start looking for a way to make money while I'm still in varsity. I better start looking for an entrepreneurial solution, you know. And one of the things that I did is, one of the things that I actually started was selling boerewors rolls outside of Stones. Now, if you're a UJ student, you're very aware of where Stones is. It's in Mpho. Underneath was used to be the Nando's. I think it's closed now, and on top was the Stones. And I started selling boerewors rolls outside of Stones. And believe it or not, my proceeds from those boerewors rolls is what actually funded my investments in Bitcoin. Because as I empowered myself more with knowledge, I actually learned that, you know, how to actually make money and scale your money is through investing. So I invested my proceeds from that into my actual business, which then obviously boomed, which is cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, which then obviously bloomed from that investment. But my initial capital started from that. That was not my only entrepreneurial thing that I did. My other entrepreneurial thing that I did was I started a cleaning business. I looked around and I said, what do I have now that I can start with now that's not going to require a lot of capital, that I can actually grow over time? You know, I started a cleaning business, scaled it from there, and then moved on from that into now investing into many different things. But that's the story of how I started. A lot of people ask me, how much capital did you have? Who was your funder? You know, and I always say I didn't have any funder. There was no capital, literally. The mop that I had, put up an ad on OLX, got a lady to help me, and started a cleaning business. Started cleaning student apartments, moved from there into houses, and moved from there and scaled it until the point where I actually sold the business. But I started with the little that I had. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, that it's all about finding a need in your locality and actually meeting that need. And you'll realize that the more you do that, the more opportunities will chase you, because you don't really get, and this is the one thing that I've learned about entrepreneurship and the beauty of entrepreneurship, is that once you start engaging into a business, you meet other business owners, you learn about other business models. And the business model which you actually started with actually changes into a whole different avenue, a different thing altogether. When Facebook started, it started off as a social media platform. Today, Facebook is actually the biggest advertising agency in the world. It's actually all about adverts. It's actually all about them making money through adverts. But when they started off as a social media platform. So it's all about pivoting as an entrepreneur as you go along. But the important thing is not to allow not having funding or not having that big idea or whatever the idea is to stop you from starting. The most important thing is to actually start and continue from starting. I want to touch a bit on cryptocurrencies because that's where a few people had questions. When we look at the cryptocurrency stage, I mean, when I started through cryptocurrencies, I didn't know much. In fact, to be very honest, I knew nothing. You know, it started off as me reading off Wikipedia pages, gathering as much information as I possibly can, and from there on trying to apply and make sense of the information, which was very tricky and very difficult in the beginning because I didn't actually know what was going on. It was a confusing industry, you know. We fast forward today, I know everything about the industry. I know everything that there is to know. And that's the journey of entrepreneurship, that you sort of start from point A where you kind of know nothing, where all you have is theoretical knowledge, to the last point B, or whatever the case you want to call it, where you kind of know everything that there is to know about that industry. And you're able to grow and scale at a pace that would make you a happy person or very profitable in whatever that you're doing. And those are some of the points that I want us to look at, is to say, when you start your entrepreneurial journey, and I think what we need to be aware of, I was looking at a research study that I believe is very premature, but I guess we're at that point, where somebody was actually looking at what industries will be thriving after COVID-19? What new industries will be thriving after COVID-19, you know? And he listed quite a few things. And the reason why I think it's premature, I think I always tell people that, but who can tell what industry will be thriving after COVID-19? It's still happening, right? We're not quite done with it, so we're not quite sure what's going to be happening afterwards. But this research study proves that online jobs are going to increase. The fact that people won't only be doing one job, people will be doing multiple jobs. So for example, if you're an editor, you'll be editing a newspaper that publishes on Sunday, and between Monday and Wednesday, you'll be editing a book, and on Thursday, you'll be editing what you call biographies or CVs. So it speaks to how the world is going to change, where people will be doing different jobs. And it also speaks to how networks will now be working from an online perspective, in terms of people will now be selling things on Zoom calls, etc., where, you know, nobody will be coming into a dealership for somebody to say, hey, we're launching a vehicle, but someone will actually be coming online to say, hi, today we're launching a new Rolls Royce, and here's the model, and we'll be watching it online as we're doing right now. And it speaks to that this new world is going to be very digital, because from COVID-19, we're going to just continue experiencing other things that will keep us indoors. And at the end of this article, I then thought to myself that the world is evolving to a space where everybody is sort of going to be forced to become an entrepreneur. Everybody will have to be forced to sort of become entrepreneurial in thinking. Even in a basic job that you've got, you're going to become very entrepreneurial through the job, because gone are the days where you go into an office and somebody tells you what to do, and, you know, you've sort of got somebody who's there to always ask them, am I doing the right thing? Am I going about it the right way? That world will no longer exist. The world we're entering now is a world where, in whatever job you've got, we're all going to become very entrepreneurial. I was looking at a platform that Discovery, Medical Aid, or rather Discovery, has now launched, where through the Zoom, and I believe they were planning on launching it even before this coronavirus time, but through the Zoom platform, I'm now able to see my doctor and consult with the doctor online and say to the doctor, I've got a rash here, I've got this there, and the doctor is able to give me the medication online by sending it through a courier service. So I'm able to consult. Obviously, I believe that for things where you actually need the doctor to check your vitals, I believe that's what they call them, you'd actually need to go in. But I was looking at this and I was saying, if I can now be consulting my doctor online and saying, hey doc, I've got a rash here, it's doing much better, whatever the case is, not only does that prove that the online world is sort of permeating the world, which we thought would never be able to permeate ever, but it also proves that each and every industry can be digitized. I was looking at another auction house in Centurion that from this week, they're going to start doing motor vehicle auctions online. So everybody's going to log on and bid from, you know, a Zoom platform for the vehicles that they're going to be selling. You know, people are going to do the prepayments of the deposit online, and everybody's going to bid, and that system is going to track who bid for what, and it's going to send them the invoice electronically. They'll settle the invoice, and from settling the invoice, the car will be delivered to them. And this is the world which we're living in, where everybody is sort of forced to level up. Nobody's ever going to be able to do things the same. This is the world that we're all gearing ourselves up for, the world that we'll all be living in. And I was looking at different companies that are saying different things. I mean, we've got Google, who's saying that they don't expect the employees to come back until 2021. They don't expect any of the employees to come back into an office until that time. I saw today that the Vice Chancellor of UJ, who happens to be the deputy chairperson of the commission that I sit on, he's saying that only 33% of the students will be coming back to UJ, and I think they're still selecting which students. But we're going to be seeing or living in a world where things are happening online. Things are happening online at a very fast and rapid pace. I was looking at an institution in, I believe, I stand under correction of where the country, I think it's Ireland, but I'm not quite sure about that. We just have to check it. But they are setting up a social media degree, an honors degree, and a master's degree in social media that will only happen online. So even institutions of learning are also moving towards that space. The Vice Chancellor of UJ had told us in a Mug and Bean briefing that UJ is working on, I don't know if it's out yet, is working on a program where they want to introduce a BCom program that's strictly going to be online only. And this is the world that we're all gearing. You know, before coronavirus, we all used to say, this is the world we're all preparing ourselves for, because it was something that was coming. But now that we're here, this is the world that we're now living. This is the world that we're now actually living in. And it's so important for us to be aware that in this new world, it's going to need everybody to sort of change the way that we think, become more agile, become better in the way that we understand things and in the way that we engage things. I'm going to open it up for questions. I believe that anybody can just ask questions on the chat box. I believe the chat box is open. And I'll be taking forth questions and just continue to engage on the questions that I'm seeing. I see a question here from Alrina. I believe Alrina's asking, what is blockchain? So blockchain is a system where it verifies and approves transactions on its own. So let me paint this picture for you so to better understand it. When we look at a system like a bank, for example, a bank is there to facilitate payments. The bank is there to verify that someone who's paying you for something is actually paying you for that thing, and that money is actually getting to you. Now, with a blockchain system, it's a coded system that actually does what the bank would do, but it does it remotely so. And how it does is it verifies and approves these different transactions that happen on the system. And it does this by actually paying a certain amount of the profits from that system. So the same amount that the bank would charge you for transferring money from your account to someone else's account. This blockchain system would then pay the people that are verifying these transactions through whatever computational machinery that they'll be using. So it's a system that's been created to tackle even the most toughest of financial systems, where financial transactions are recorded on the system. And this system is actually able to verify these transactions. And not only that, but also keep them on a public ledger where people can go and verify that these transactions have actually happened. I hope I've explained it. I've tried to sort of compress it so that it actually makes sense in a very short space of time. But that's what a blockchain system is. And people are now predicting that the world will be using more and more blockchain systems. PwC actually has a report where they studied that 84% of companies globally are actively involved or researching blockchain technology to see how they can implement it in their own value chains and their own companies. We've got a comment. Sarah says, I agree, South Africa need to change their mentalities. Sarah also says, they're at UJ, I'm doing it online already, completed one module. Okay, I think she's talking about the online degree that I spoke about. Kulufelo is asking, why can't Africans make their own cryptocurrency? A very good question. So Africans actually can make their own cryptocurrency. And I'm currently working on a very fascinating project where I want to digitize African minerals and create them into a cryptocurrency. And that way, it will allow for more liquidity to come from the rest of the world into actual markets. So for example, I'll use gold as an example, taking gold and digitizing gold and allowing somebody who's in Switzerland, Paris, in America to buy gold from a South African gold mine and keep it in a vault or wherever in South Africa or from them, all through a digital system. And that gold will be represented through that digital system. And they can then sell that gold without actually seeing or touching it to somebody else through a digital coin. So that's something that I'm working on, not specifically in the gold industry, in a different industry, the chromium industry, but that's something I'm working on. So it is possible for Africans to create their own cryptocurrency. And yeah, that's something to look out for. I see Andile says, great discussion, Mpho. Your discussion around starting a business as a student is in line with my thinking regarding this. My logic has always been that the educated ones are in a better position to risk starting a business. How do you think this new normal affects the future of varsity degrees? Will we need them? Or will platforms such as Brilliant and Skillshare be the norm? An awkward question you ask me as I've been invited by a university, whether university degrees will still be relevant. I think my thinking around how learning is going to work within the fourth industrial revolution is that learning will have to change. Learning will definitely have to change. And I've had this conversation with different lecturers as well as different professors from different universities. Learning will have to change from a concept of sort of teaching students theory to more teaching students how to think. And I think that's where learning will have to get to, from moving away from theory. And I mean, we can even see it in the open book test model that people are creating all around the world, to say, you have the theory with you. You know, people will now be taking examinations from the comfort of their own home. So they'll be able to go onto Google and research what the answer is, or open their textbook, or whatever the case is. So it's going to move from sort of testing what the person has been able to learn to more teaching the person how to actually think. So for example, when we look at how a quantum computer actually thinks, or how a quantum computer actually processes things, that's where learning is going to move towards, to teach students how certain systems and how certain things actually work in terms of their thinking. And as we see more of that, we're going to see degrees sort of turn into, move away from sort of being a traditional degree where you leave with sort of theoretical knowledge, and move more into a degree where you think, or where you're taught how to think in a certain way. So for example, we're going to look at certain ways on how manufacturing actually works, and teach people how the actual thinking behind that manufacturing line actually gets to work, how behind how a certain computational language gets to work. So it's going to move more from the theory part of things to more of how we actually think. And I think, if anything, the truth is we can't really get rid of universities, but what we can definitely do is change the way that universities operate, and move them into more institutions that actually work together with the entrepreneurial people that exist. I had a conversation with a professor from the University of Pretoria who actually created the 3D transplant. So he made a 3D printed transplant, ear transplant. So he actually created a 3D printout of an earpiece that was actually missing in someone's body, and they used that to actually implant it or put it into somebody's body. And one of the things that he said that universities need to start working with profitable institutions as well. Because I think universities always work together with NGOs, together with institutions that are not really very fast forward into saying we stand for making a profit. And universities will have to change the model to sort of working with those institutions and ensuring that the solutions that they're coming forth with are actually profitable. And so in explaining it, the university would come up with a method, like, for example, actual 3D transplant of an ear, and that would then work together with the private hospitals, the hospitals that we have, and that integration would work in together with both institutions to ensure that what's being created in universities is actually being commercially viable and being sold out there so people can actually have it. We've got another question here from Gustav. He says, have you read the book Blockchain Revolution by Don and Alex? I highly recommend it to anyone. That's a recommendation. Somebody's asking, hi, Mpho, what is the future of Bitcoin? Do you see companies paying employees with Bitcoin? Is it legal? Okay, is it legally recognized in South Africa? And is SARS involved? Very interesting. I think the conversation around Bitcoin is the same conversation we have when we talk about the first computer. That Bitcoin was sort of the first application of blockchain technology, and was sort of the first way that people actually got introduced to what cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology is. Now, how I see companies using this technology is, I see companies, and you'll have to sort of understand how blockchain works for you to understand what I'm saying. So for example, a company would put out the task that they need to be done on a blockchain system. An employee would then go onto that blockchain system, download the task, and start working on the task. After the employee has completed the task, they'll upload the task onto that blockchain system. And upon doing that, they will receive from that very same blockchain system a payment in whatever cryptocurrency waveform shape that they've created. It can be Bitcoin, it can be Ethereum, it can be anything. I mean, IBM's got their own coins, Mercedes-Benz is now working on their own coins. It can be in whatever way that the coin is supposed to be. Now, that whole system will happen without a certain boss checking up on whether the work is being done. So as work is actually submitted online on this blockchain system, payments will be released automatically by this system without a supervisor checking, has the work been submitted, how does the work look like, etc. Now we take it into different industries. For example, we could take it to the insurance industries, where a blockchain system is built into insurance industry, where when you have a claim, you don't need to submit it to a human being. You'd submit it to this blockchain system, and through this blockchain system, quotes would then be generated. And through this computational system, everything will be done seamlessly through the programming that's been created through it. So this is where I see the cryptocurrency and the blockchain revolution going, where companies are engaging more with it, using more of it in this specific way. I see another question. Oh, is SARS involved? Yes. Cryptocurrencies are taxable in South Africa, so everybody should pay the tax according to the tax regime that exists within the country.
What is the proportion of your portfolio in Bitcoin?
Very good question too. So my opinion on Bitcoin is that I'll always treat Bitcoin as a Rolls Royce. All other cryptocurrencies for me will then occupy the Mercedes-Benz, the BMW, the Toyota Corolla, the Mazda, the rest of all the car companies. So for me, Bitcoin will always be the Rolls Royce. And I think I'm very biased towards that. But not only am I biased, but it makes sense in terms of the market cap, as well as the proportion of the market it holds. For me, I would keep my proportion at 50% Bitcoin, and the rest are then spread out within some of the top performing coins that I like, or the up and coming coins.
All right, all right. Now let's just also, to people that are still listening on Facebook, on Zoom, if you have any more questions for Mpho, please do send them through. I have one in the moment. Mpho, we're looking at lots of youth unemployment in South Africa. And I think when you look at, for instance, your journey, you mentioned in your presentation a bit earlier how you started in university, you know, with a business. So in terms of our young people and our unemployment problem, how do you think cryptocurrency and Bitcoin could help us solve this problem?
We're going to start seeing unemployment move from a country perspective into a global perspective, because I read a tweet the other day. It was quite funny, but very relevant, where somebody was saying, the scary thing about working from home is when you realize that anyone from anywhere around the world can replace your job. Because think about it, if you can successfully work from home, then that means that somebody in Ireland can do your job in South Africa while they're from Ireland. That means a South African in China, or not even a South African, Japanese national, a Taiwanese national can do your job from wherever they are. And that's what people are now waking up to the fact that your job no longer requires you to put on a suit and get into an office and you know, sort of maintain that office-like relationship and decorum. You can now do your job from wherever you are in the world. I had a friend of mine who I spoke to. She runs a portfolio at Momentum, and I said to her, how are you surviving working from home? And she said to me, in actual fact, if this coronavirus thing continues, I'd actually reconsider moving into my mom's home for some time, you know? And we laughed about it, and actually realized that this is the world that we're going to, where one could be anywhere around the world doing, where, for example, Momentum, Sunlamp, Discovery could have 60% of their employees coming from China, coming from India, you know? Or where Facebook could have 20% of the employees coming from a different country, you know? I was looking at Facebook, the way that they have the call centers, or the people that actually reply to most of their work, most of them sit in the Philippines, you know, whereas Facebook actually sits their head office in America. So we're moving into a world where the lines are going to be very blurred in terms of unemployment. So unemployment will no longer become a South African thing, it will become a global thing, where anyone can be employed from anywhere around the world. Now, with this being said, what we need to realize is that what cryptocurrencies have been able to show us is that currency can actually be created from anywhere around the world, and people can use it at the same time and exchange it in a simple way. So for example, people then ask the questions of, but would I be paid in dollars? Would I be paid in rands? Would I be paid in, you know, peso or whatever currency it is? When we look at a cryptocurrency, you could be paid in one coin that would affect everybody at the same time all around the world. So everybody who's working for this virtual company that has no head office at all could be paid all at the same time. It was very interesting when I was explaining to somebody that when you look at some of these companies that are growing at a fast rate in today's day and age, they actually don't need an office. TikTok, for example, why would anybody ever need to go into TikTok's office? What's it called? I think it's called Hangout. Hangout, House Party. Sorry, House Party. House Party as well. You know, you don't need to go into any office for House Party, you know. So House Party could employ anyone from anywhere around the world for them to function without them ever having an office. So I think that's what cryptocurrencies show us, and that's what they teach us, that you could sort of do it from anywhere around the world.
I think, Mpho, you actually had another interesting dimension in terms of how do we get paid for the work that we do? Because at the moment we're getting paid, you know, you in your bank account or that type of thing. But I think you in many ways, you're so right in terms of how cryptocurrency can actually change the way in which people get paid. But also, I think it presents, interestingly, a matter of unionization. You know, for instance, in terms of unions, how will that then factor into the work that they do in terms of cryptocurrency, because it just changes how people will get paid.
Very true. I think a lot of the different things that exist are going to take a different turn. The other day, somebody was telling me that a decision was made in their body corporate. So they live in an estate. And they were telling me that a decision was made in the body corporate on a WhatsApp platform. So all the members of the body corporate all voted on WhatsApp, and then that decision was made. I mean, back in the day when we used to make decisions for properties, etc., all these decisions are then made, you know, when a quorum is met in an actual sitting where an agenda is put forth, etc. But they all made the decision on WhatsApp to say, we can't meet, let's make decision on WhatsApp. And I think we're going to see a total different regime change where laws are going to change, you know, courtrooms are going to change, you know, policing systems are going to change, you know. I said to somebody the other day that gone are the days where you go into the police house and you have to sort of explain, or, you know, whatever police station is nearest to you, and you sort of have to explain that I'm being cyber bullied on Facebook, you know. And the police sort of say, well, what are we supposed to do about it? I said, we're going to live in a world where cyberbullying will be the new norm. To say, I've got somebody who, whenever I go online, they're continually making my existence online, because it will be seen as an actual existence uncomfortable, you know. And the police will be giving restraining orders to say, you can no longer feature in any one of this person's online videos. You know, and it sounds ridiculous right now to say, wait, would we actually get to that point where someone's getting a restraining order to say, you can never come onto my IG live or my Facebook live? And this is the world that we're gearing ourselves up for, where everything is going to become digital, and we're going to see the digital being more real, you know. I was laughing at somebody. I said, because it was a friend of mine who said to me, they've got a Zoom meeting at 4 o'clock, and it was about 3:45. And I said to him, well, you have to get going before you get fired, you know. And then she was like, oh, wow, imagine, what would they write in my dismissal note? Was late for a Zoom session, you know? And this is the world we're gearing ourselves for. People are going to get, you know, dismissed because they showed up to a Zoom meeting with their dog disturbing them, you know, and they couldn't focus, or they couldn't close the client on that Zoom meeting, because the world is going to stick or become more and more digital as we know it and as we see it. And we're going to see a movement that's going to start where unions, parties, labor parties are going to start lobbying for free internet for all.
Yeah,
we're going to
definitely
see it happening very, very soon, where unions will come forth and say, we want all our employees to have free internet in their homes installed for them. You know, the same way that unions lobbied for lunch times at work, canteens at work, etc. So we're going to see these things. So I think there will be a role for unions, there will be a role for police, there will be a role for everyone, but the role will now be new and different in its nature and in the job description.
Now, Paul, there's a few other questions here. Some of them, if maybe we've covered them already, if you responded to them already, we'll just move on from them. We have someone who's asking if Luna is a good platform to trade on. And then also someone is asking about mining blockchain as well.
Okay, cool. So Luna is a good platform. It's owned by Naspers. If you don't know who Naspers is, they're the ones who own DSTV. So they own Luno together with Rand Merchant Investments. If you don't know who Rand Merchant Investments is, they own F&B. So it's a good platform that's owned by that partnership and many other investors. So it's quite a good platform. So this person asked, what is mining Bitcoin? So mining Bitcoin is the process that I spoke about earlier, where you actually create these Bitcoins for yourself. So when people transact using Bitcoin, when I send Bitcoin to another person, there's someone else who needs to validate and approve the transaction. Now, the person who validates and approves the transaction is not quite a human being sitting behind a computer. It's more someone who's actually got computational power, and that power, we call it mining power, that actually validates and approves that transaction, and then the transaction then goes through to the next person. So mining is a process where you validate and you approve transactions. I see I've got 5 minutes left.
I think let's just quickly just take maybe one last question if there's anyone who wants to ask quickly. But I think in the meantime, there's a comment coming through from Sarah. She's just made a comment here. She says that she believes that people are not working anymore, but have put a lot of systems that work for them. SA needs to change their mentality and working for other companies, which I think you've touched on quite a lot in terms of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, very, very true. I think in closing, we all need to be aware that the world is no longer changing. The world has changed. I often say to people that data today is the new oil. Nobody's going to be looking for oil to drive their cars. We're all going to be looking for data to do our jobs and for data for us to grow our companies and grow whatever institutions that we're in. That the world has changed, and it's up to us as young South Africans to participate in this new world effectively through entrepreneurship, through engaging the different industries that we have, and through forging forth through all the different adversities that we've got and all the different challenges that we've got as Africa, and fighting for Africa to take its seat and take part in this fourth industrial revolution effectively and also profitably so that we're able to bridge this unequal gap that we've got in Africa, able to bridge this unequal gap that we've got in South Africa, but not only that, empower, educate, and strengthen our people. So thank you to everybody who tuned in. I think we had about 50-something people who tuned in on the Zoom. We had lots of people as well on the Facebook, and I believe this is also going to be put onto YouTube as well. Thank you so much for hosting, and thank you to all the organizers. This was a fun and informative session, I believe.
The future reimagined.